Hello out there, and welcome to the No Shit Cast. I'm your host, Matt Frazier. 50, count them, 50 big fat freaking episodes, baby. We've done it. We've reached the half-century mark. And what a long, strange trip it's been. Special episode sitting in the hot seat with me today here, folks. The gray wizard of historical knowledge himself, Mr. Eric D Smith. How you doing today, Eric?
Good, Matt. How are you?
Well, I'm 50 freaking episodes, man. I mean, how do you think it would be? So it's been nuts getting here. It's what started out as like a little hobby project with one microphone, and then here we are sitting on 50 episodes. 50. That's nuts. I'm just stunned. And we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording about looking back and just seeing all the different guests and everything that's been on the show, and the different types of topics that we've covered. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, if I had to tell somebody, what is this show? What is it? What is it about?
What's going on here?
It's really kind of hard to explain, huh?
It's a variety show.
Is that what it is? I'm like Jack Benny.
Maybe more like Phil Donahue.
Phil Donahue?
Yeah.
With better hair.
Yeah.
That's all I remember about him is he was like,
he just like white hair.
He had like white hair forever. That was nuts. But so here we sit. We've had book authors, we've had college professors, we've had theorists, we've had Taoists,
musicians, authors, game designers.
It's been nuts.
Yeah, lots of stuff.
And if I had to kind of distill it down, what this show's about.
Interesting topic.
Yeah, it's about the stuff that I think's fun.
Yeah,
that's all it's about. So it's my sense of humor and my where my interests lie and things like that. But obviously they're eclectic and strange because we've covered things like stoned ape theory and stuff like that.
And yep. Anyway.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna help you.
Where
man.
you go to the gym.
Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Thank you.
Yeah,
yes, like, Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Are we like an MMA show? No,
it could be.
We could be. Yeah, absolutely could be. This is as much as we talk about it. Yeah, we've had musicians on here. It's been crazy, man. But anyway, so here we sit, 50th episode. Studio moved for the third freaking time.
And we're going to talk about things.
And we're going to talk about stuff and things and stuff. So the article you were just showing me was pretty wild, and I think our plasma cosmology and electric universe folks might get a kick out of that. But
they say now that they've made a discovery about white dwarf stars, they did a study with 15,000 white dwarf stars, and they believe now that they are essentially crystals floating in space illuminating light.
So these stars are not big balls of gas that are having massive nuclear reaction. Is it nuclear? Nuclear? Anyway,
fission.
They're not having those big fission reactions.
Sorry,
fusion reactions. That's not what's happening. Is that the idea?
It still may be happening. It's just it's not emitting as much heat as it normally did. The fuel has ran out because most stars are going to end up as white dwarfs, so that they get there by expending their fuel. So the larger part of the energy that they're producing has already been distributed into the universe through their life cycle, and their energy is winding down. Then when they start cooling off, the liquid in the center solidifies into a crystal, and then it like radiates light and heat. And they don't know how long it will radiate light and heat, but they theorize it could be quadrillions of years. Which is a long time in the future. Yeah,
I know,
I guess our universe is around 13, 14 billion years old, so they got a long way to go
long way to go before they burn out.
And theoretically, they say then they'll call them black dwarfs, and they'll just be like spheres, crystal spheres.
Big giant crystal spheres. Do you know?
No, about the size of a planet. Because by the time they've lost all their energy, they collapse under their own weight, because a star like our sun is in hyperstatic equilibrium, where it's kind of like constantly exploding but pushing out, but at the same time its mass is so massive that it's pulling it back in, so it just makes a sphere shape, right? But once it loses all of that energy, it starts shrinking and collapsing in on itself, and then all the atoms in the liquid, when it starts to cool, just align because of that pressure and makes a crystal.
A big giant crystal.
So, yeah, so that's what they say.
I can see, because there's a lot of people that are into crystals, man, that are like going to get old.
Well, there's a lot of people who would probably say that might be some of the quantum and psychic connections that occur throughout the universe.
How so?
Well, because people use crystals in that sort of thing all the time.
Divination and all.
Well,
all
and amethyst for your third eye, like there's focal points. These crystals can be used as focal points for psychic energy, a lot of people believe, and other things too. I mean, like in some instances, I believe light travels faster through crystals because of the way that the atoms are lined in the crystals, stacked up in a lattice.
Just more efficient?
Yeah, they can propagate easier, and it actually increases the speed of light, if I remember correctly. So crystals are kind of interesting, and sometimes there's an argument as to whether they're a life form or not. And they occur often in different ways. Like you can get Jimson crystals in caves, like in Lechgichi in Mexico. And, of course, now I imagine that the type of crystals that they're talking about in these white dwarfs are far more dense, because it was a whole red giant, potentially, at one point, that shrunk down to like the size of Earth. So that must be a very dense crystal. But if that's the case, and if crystals can be used to propagate energy quicker, then those extra dense crystals would probably do it better.
I could just, because it's funny, because every time one of these type of white paper type articles or whatever comes out, it's interesting how it disseminates down through the different sort of belief structures and ideologies is probably a better way to say that.
Yeah.
And how that same data gets interpreted differently by the different groups, So that's why the first thing that hit me was big giant energy crystals in space.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a group of people that are really going to dig that article,
Because I'm sure that there's some sort of connection, like geometrical connection between them that could be established, because that can be established in most senses anyway.
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense.
But it's interesting though. Like it throws off some of the equations for measuring time and distance. A lot of times they use the color and brightness of stars to indicate distance and stuff. So
right.
Now that they've decided that maybe these are crystals that's just emitting heat and light, their age has been thrown off by a couple billion years.
So they got to recalculate like the age of the universe, kind
of thing?
The
age of something and the distance of some things. There's a few things that they're going to have to recalculate. But, it's a lot of times things like this gets turned upside down, just like with dark energy. Now the latest research is saying that there was some mistakes in the original calculations, and that in fact there may not be any type of dark energy at all. There may not be anything that's making the universe expand faster and faster.
Well, that's where the guys that have been on recently, so Neil Thompson and Shifu Koriyaga, both are big proponents of this the electric universe kind of concept that makes, because there's explain that, because basically there's some holes in the math, right?
Explain what?
That they were plugging dark energy in to say that's what's causing this, but now they're saying that there's no proof that actually exists. So there's holes in the math again that makes, and these holes, right, are explanations, mathematical explanations of why the universe acts the way it does, and we can't entirely explain that, right? Is that kind of
essentially, yeah. I mean, because they knew that the universe was expanding, and they just thought it was at a more or less constant rate. And then at about 1993 or so, they started believing that it was expanding faster and faster and faster. Now they're saying it's not. But in that interbellum, they didn't really change the universe's age or anything like that. You know, they didn't recalculate, I guess because it was still just a theory. You know.
Because I'd heard, I think one of the guys, I can't remember which one, it might have been Sherfu, was saying that like the whole concept of black holes now has been kind of blown to pieces, and they're sort of having to readdress all of that again now too, right?
Well, I'm not sure what he's talking about, but he may be talking about what was called the black hole wars between Kip Thorne, Stephen Hawking, and Sussman. I remember, I think it's his last name. I don't remember his first name though. Sussman. Anyway, it was Sussman who won the black hole wars. I think that Kip Thorne took the traditional standpoint about singularities, and that Stephen Hawking was taking his viewpoint, which dealt with Hawking radiation, and Sussman had a completely different opinion about it all, and somehow he won. The bet was a year subscription to Playboy magazine. It was.
Physicists, huh?
Anyone.
Who knew physicists were pervs? But yeah, I guess if they carry the male gene, is it chromosome or gene? Which is it?
I think chromosome.
That makes you male.
Yeah,
it's perversion sort of comes with that. I'm just being honest. But that's what these guys, the last two guys especially that I've talked to, said that they're basically trying to get an at bat here as a theory that that the electric universe theory, and it has a lot to do with making up that distance, that space that is missing.
I see.
In these other theories,
yes,
you know, so they're not like anti Isaac Newton or any of that. They're saying that these are not complete, and that here's a theory that fills in a lot of these gaps, and you know, and they make that argument that it's never really given credence, even though these other theories continue to, like dark matter, continue to not pan out.
Yeah. And lots of things are like that. Like the Higgs boson, when they found that, it was a completely different atomic weight than they thought it would be. So,
yeah, it turns out it was just a boson, right? It wasn't even anything spectacular.
Yeah, it was just it wasn't it wasn't what they thought it would be, and it didn't explain the things that they thought it would explain, and they need to now explain things that fit the observation that they've seen. So they're going to re-explain these things.
They're going to have to.
Yes. So yeah, it's open. I mean, a lot of this stuff, all of this stuff, Orco-R, even the discovery about crystal spheres and white dwarfs, I mean, the black hole wars, it's all just our best guess on observation.
And that's it.
That's about it. Yeah, I mean, there's a few tricks and stuff that, you know, but like spectrometry and parallaxal distance from near objects and Cepheid variance for far away objects and things like that. There's some tricks, but it's just essentially observations and numbers and you know, trying to figure out what it might mean and
right.
And then a lot of that stuff's open to fair game. I mean, that's why you have a television series about ancient aliens and stuff, because you know, nobody can definitively say no to some of this stuff or explain exactly how. They recently found a new chamber in the Large Pyramid too. I mean, you know, as another example of just something where for years now we've seen pictures of what the inside of that looks like, and now they think they found another chamber. So
here we go. Get ready to rewrite the history books yet again, right?
At least to add what this chamber is, and who knows what it will reveal if nobody's been in it yet.
It's going to prove that the Great Pyramids were giant batteries.
Maybe.
That's, I mean, believe it or not, I've listened to the arguments for that. And I'm going, well, you know, they're not technically wrong. It could have been. It's, you know, kind of thing.
And they hypothesized that the obelisk placement throughout Egypt was one of the ways that they dissipated that energy and spread it around their kingdom.
Right.
Speaking of the black hole wars, though, I wanted to just add that the traditional viewpoint is what basically the Einsteinian viewpoint, which is that when a singularity, a star collapses down to about the size of an atom, that it creates an event horizon around it. And when light passes that event horizon, it does not come back out. It gets sucked into this black hole and never to be returned. Anything that goes into the black hole never comes back out. The problem with that was that it violated one of the tenets of physics, which is you can't get rid of energy. You can, mass and energy are the same. You can switch it back and forth, but you can't just get rid of it. And by the Einstein view, that's what it was saying. If stuff falls into here, it's effectively all your universe. You've thrown it away and it's gone. So that's what started them to kind of thinking about it again and looking at it, trying to figure out if that indeed was the case. And I think that Einstein and Rosenberg were the first people to come up with the idea of a wormhole, and I think it was for that reason that they were trying to math a way into figuring out where this universe went, and they were hypothesizing that they're perhaps in some other universe or somewhere else in our universe, there would be a white hole that would disperse all of this energy. Some people, before they knew what pulsars and quasars were, they thought maybe that's what these things were. They were the other end of a black hole. But now they know that pulsars, and they also thought that pulsars were alien signals from outer space because they would repeat regularly on the cycle. But it turns out they're rotating neutron stars and quasars, which they didn't know what those were. There's even an episode of the original Star Trek where they land on a quasar. It's really weird, or on a planet that's in a quasar or something strange. But like quasars are the supermassive black holes at the center of galaxies, and most of the time they're not active, but when they are, they're feeding on stars, and they're supermassive, and they expel a lot of gamma rays, and that's what we see when we look at quasars. So anyways, that was kind of like the story of black holes as I grew up. Then when Stephen Hawking started working on black holes, and he had wrote, I believe, his thesis in physics school on star collapsation and life cycle of stars, and then he expanded that work to black holes, and eventually he decided that what happens is that the energy, as it approaches the event horizon, the gravitational waves are so strong that anything that approaches this event horizon gets ripped into energy. Like, I'd say ripped to shreds, but it's accretion, which is the purest form of conversion of matter into energy, is accretion. So it's an accretion effect, and it just turns this shit into gamma rays, right? Like whatever gets in there, it's gamma rays. But the gamma rays don't escape, and what he proposed was essentially that some of the gamma rays and particles that leaked into the event horizon would spin out through the poles, and that black holes would eventually evaporate, getting rid of all the energy that they took in, spinning it out as one subatomic particle at a time through its poles, evaporating in that manner over billions of years, presumably. And thus, that solved the information paradoxes. What went in would eventually come out. It would just take time, and it would be completely randomized. And that sounded good. And then Sussman came up with this idea, which is kind of novel, I think. You know how for our GPS we have to have cesium atom clocks on satellites.
Yeah, ultra precise. Yeah.
Yeah. They have to adjust them because time literally slows down the closer you are to something that makes gravity. So the closer you are to the surface of the planet, time is going slower here on the surface of the planet than it is 15,000 miles in orbit, or however far the orbit is, right? Like, because it's further away from the Earth and further away from the gravity that the Earth causes, time is flowing faster. So they have to adjust these things or people would wreck. Of course, that's like Einstein's time is relative to every person, but it's also speed too. The faster you move, the slower time goes.
Yeah, interesting. Huh?
So it's going faster because they're further away from the Earth, but because they're orbiting the Earth at a certain speed, it's going slower. And we know this, and we know the calculations, and we can calculate this all out, right? So, Susskind, back to black holes, says that what actually happens as anything approaches the event horizon is that essentially the gravity is so intense that what's happening is time has come to a stop. And when what happens is all the information in the universe that shreds into gamma rays gets imprinted in a two-dimensional surface of the event horizon. So it technically is still in our universe. It's just compressed into 2 dimensions on the surface of the event horizon, stuck in time.
Okay.
And apparently he won. I don't know how they decided
that.
I don't know how it's determined.
But he got the subscription to Playboy magazine.
He got that, yeah. And he wrote a book. There's a book called The Black Hole Wars that you can read. And there's probably documentaries. There might even be one on it. And there's stuff you can find on YouTube, I think, about it as well. But that's, but the example that I'm trying to illustrate is that those are 3 very interestingly sci-fi diversible ideas of something that people have only recently been able to actually directly observe. So there could be 5 or 6 other theories that's just as interesting,
Right. No, absolutely.
Because we've went through wormholes, we've went through shredding the universe into component subatomic particles, and now we're having all of the 3-dimensional information imprinted in 2 dimensions with Susskind. So that's in fact, that is what gave rise to the holographic universe principle, where people will say that you're living in a hologram, that everything around you is projected, and they'll say, the closer you look at anything, the harder it becomes to actually see what that thing is. So just like a picture on a computer screen, if you get too close, it pixelates out. And they will point to that as one of the reasons why they think it's like a simulation or a hologram.
Well, that's what they call it, the Planck level. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
When you look at something at such a microscopic level, it seems to pixelate.
Yeah. Yep. And essentially it's just because of
Planck scale. That's what it's called. The Planck scale. Yep.
Yeah. Planck measure, Planck scale. Basically, once you're getting down to that level, things like photons, which are normally what we gain all of our information with, most of our information with, observation information through photons, are so energetic and large compared to things that are on the Planck length scale, that when a photon hits it, it just bashes it and moves it and changes its energy state and various things. So, directly observing something at that point is going to mess it up.
Right. Because you have to hit it with something to observe it because it's so small, right?
Yeah.
So you have to hit it with a beam of light or a laser. You have to hit it with something. So there's going to be an energy transfer, but at least kinetically, yeah.
That's why in science fiction, they talk about neutron telescopes or microscopes, neutron microscopes, because neutrons are significantly atomically smaller than a photon. And so you would be able to, if you could bounce them off of something and have them come back to your view or your detector or whatever, you would be able to have a finer ability to look down at those things without disturbing them and seeing them in their natural state and environment.
Right. That's cool stuff. I mean, I like, one of the things that we were talking about was even Einstein had the cosmological constant, which I heard, I don't want to attribute this to anybody specifically, especially any of the guests, because I don't think they said it. I'd heard it from somebody that was kind of like Einstein's fudge factor.
Well, yeah, Einstein did not, he believed in a static universe. He believed in a static universe. He believed that God made the universe and made it static. That was a belief of his. So when he started doing calculations and realized that it was expanding, and he tried to put something into it to counterbalance that so that it would be static, and he used the Greek symbol lambda to represent this cosmological constant in his equations. But I mean, he put it in there because he didn't feel that the universe was like that. He believed that that was wrong intrinsically and changed it, and that's why they call it his biggest blunder. But I mean, I don't know if you'd call it a blunder if you specifically say, "Hey, I don't agree with this, and I'm changing it." Like I'm going to add this thing purposely to make it the way I want it.
Right.
So, I mean, because it was Hubble that accidentally found out that the universe was expanding.
They were looking at through telescopes.
Yeah. Well, I think he left for a weekend and left the telescope on, like photographing and collecting light, and he discovered a galaxy and realized that, like, up until Hubble, that we thought that our galaxy was the universe. We didn't know that there were other galaxies, let alone billions of other galaxies out there. And
when was this? This was in the 1900s, right?
Yeah, I want to say 1919, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
man.
like I was 1920s was hitting me
like
for
that.
some reason.
Yeah, like we could fact check it pretty quick, but just weird, like when he discovered that, it's like the universe was way bigger than they thought, and they had noted that all of the light was redshifted. So, like, if something's emitting light and it's coming to you, the frequency of that light will be compressed because it's moving towards you, and that light's frequency compression will shift it into a blue spectrum. If something's moving away from you, just the opposite. The light that travels from the object to you, the frequency is going to be stretched out, and that light is going to move into the red spectrum.
Right.
So he noticed that, like, all of these galaxies were, like, almost all of them were red shifted, meaning that they were moving away from us. So there are all these billions of galaxies, and they're all moving away from us, and that's what led to the Big Bang Theory. That observation that everything was moving away from us. Like, well, that's weird. It's kind of like we're in the middle of an explosion. If we turn back the clock, it looks like everything's moving to us, and it's like, or, moving together.
I thought that the background cosmic radiation or whatever was the proof.
Well, that's the nail in the coffin
for Big Bang Theory.
For the Big Bang Theory.
So that's you can't say that the Big Bang Theory didn't happen, because you can literally see it.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, that's great bookends too, right? Like the beginning of the bookend is just figuring out that there's shit out there and it's flying away from you and you don't know why, to the very end where you can see the microwave background radiation and realize that that's the leftover radiation from that explosion that's spread throughout all of the universe. Now, these two guys...
Unless it's not.
Yeah, well, it could be something else.
So you would have to find another reason, something else to attribute that to, but...
Yeah. But my biggest problem with the Big Bang Theory is Alan Guth's inflation model, where there's a theory that at the beginning of the universe, that the universe traveled faster than the speed of light and filled out the whole universe that existed at that time.
Sort of just exploded into existence, like bang.
Well, yeah, it exploded, but after the explosion, it accelerated faster than the speed of light, faster than, from what I understand, faster than the explosion itself.
Okay.
And the reason why this came about is because we recognized that there was this homogeny of distributed energy throughout the universe. It was very, there wasn't any one place that had more or less energy in it, right? And the only way that they could figure out that this happened was that at some point at the beginning of the Big Bang, after the initial explosion, it somehow traveled faster than light and filled up all the space equally, and then started slowing down. And that's called inflation. That's a part of the Big Bang Theory. It's called inflation, and Alan Guth came up with that. You can look that up or whatever, and check it out. But I mean, everything sounds really good about the Big Bang Theory, and except that. I mean, that's like all these other examples of the black hole and stuff. That's just somebody's best guess, and as well as they could math it out. And this is what they say, this must have happened because we see the end result is this, and so to get here, we had to have this. And this is the best way I can explain it, is through inflation. And it always bothers me in theories like that when it's like, you don't know. It could change. Like, 30 years from now, there may be some other guy that comes along and says, nope, what happened was this. And, it wasn't an explosion. It was a sphere that exploded inward, and it bounced back, and now everything's expanding because of that bounce back. It's like you never know, man. It could be anything.
Well, this is stuff. This is the questions and the things that are often used by people who don't like science as their methodology to say, well, science isn't, doesn't have all of the facts and have all of the answers.
Very
right?
true. That's very true.
Well, no, that's not true, though.
No, but if they don't have the facts, they just throw away the facts and start again.
No, I get that. But people who are against things like immunizations or whatever will say, they'll juxtapose. First of all, they throw all science into the same bucket, which it's not.
No.
Okay, and there's a difference between theories and laws, and that's where it starts to fall apart. They don't understand that there's still a discovery process that happens in science and has to continue to happen to find bigger, better, faster, more efficient ways to do things. And material science evolves all the time, and they theorize mathematically that things exist, and then they go out and they try to prove it. But that doesn't change laws of physics and things that are proven and established. And that side of science is still very factual, very prudent, but people who don't want to believe certain things, will lump it all together and say, well, the science doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
That's funny because I'm trying to think who it was we were talking. I think it might have been Neil, but as a community, because we were talking about the biases and the things that are even inherent inside the scientific community. Because like recently, I shouldn't laugh about this, but some people wrote white papers, air quotes, or papers to some pretty prestigious scientific journals, where they did it to highlight bias. Okay, so what am I saying? So they would like they did a scientific paper on, like, they were observing. They were looking for like specific types of sexual biases and things. They weren't actually doing any of this. They were just making this stuff up. But if they figured if they wrote the right verbiage, the stuff that hit the right politically correct buttons or whatever, that they could establish that there's a bias inside, and they did. And unfortunately, some of these journals actually published these papers, and it does show that even inside the scientific community that there are biases and things like that. However, as a community, for absorbing and processing and integrating new information, new data, the scientific community is significantly way ahead of the general populace as far as that's concerned. Like they're way more apt to look at something and go, okay, there's the data, I'll accept that into my paradigm, versus like the general public won't do that at all. They're still way better than anything else we have, I guess, as a mechanism for guiding, or giving us information to help guide society.
Well, and they're named appropriately too. I mean, a doctor of medicine is called a physician, and a cosmologist is oftentimes called a theoretical physicist.
A theorist.
Theorist,
Meaning that, like, hey, we're just making some of this shit up and seeing what
best
happens.
Ideas. Yeah. It's not a bad thing. It's how you gain progress. It's the beginning of progress, right? The people who are dreaming about what things are. It doesn't matter how you're dreaming. You can dream in any way. You can dream with your with a solid theory, or one that's not as solid, or with a spiritual bent. But it's those people who are the beginning of progress, because eventually one of them come up with something and it pretty much works out, and then people start messing with it and we start using it, making tools and doing things and stuff.
No doubt.
A lot of Einstein's papers were really practical. Eventually, as time went by and science improved and technology, we used a lot of his concepts to make a lot of different types of technology that we use today. We're still like, wow, it was really cool about that relativity thing, right? Yeah, but I'm glad we got a TV.
Well, it's the irony of all of this, right, is obvious. It's that the people that are part of these sort of counter science or anti-science groups and things like that are all using mechanisms that were given to them by science to communicate with each other. And like everyone's using a cell phone and not getting it in their head that, hey, science did that too.
Yeah.
Right. This all just didn't happen by accident. It's there's a little more to it than that.
It's sad to say, but probably the best science is the that's brought about by wars, cold wars and hot wars, because a lot of times.
Oh, fear.
Well, just I mean, no, the actual war itself. Like when you're actually at war with somebody and you need to develop things, and you need to get them tested, you need to work them out.
Necessity is
necessity, yeah. And really, for science, there's even when it comes to things like your own survival, like worrying about the greenhouse effect and stuff like that, we're pretty slow to react. But when we're at war with somebody, we'll invent some crazy stuff and try it out. And sometimes, like a lot of the stuff that we had in the 80s through the 90s, where a lot of that miniaturization and stuff was first used in the government, in war, in spies for the Cold War and things like that,
Sure, yeah.
So,
And we wouldn't have Velcro without NASA.
Scientists need to get paid.
Yeah.
yeah, Velcro, yeah. I mean, scientists need to get paid, though, unless they're going to invent something like Velcro and can get rich or something. I mean, so it doesn't surprise me that they could be corrupted and do things like that because they're,
I think it all works out in the end, though, man. It all has a way of balancing out, it seems like.
Well, certain things, like with physics, like you were saying, those are like laws of physics, and you can test some of those in your backyard. You know what I mean?
And we can say we don't necessarily understand why gravity exists.
No, but we can utilize it.
But you can guarantee that it's mathematically provable and works
in
every
everybody's
single
backyards
time.
everywhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't change. It doesn't alter in your backyard and different in mine.
Yeah, that doesn't mean science sucks.
No.
It is what it is.
Science is a search, man. It's not the end result.
Right.
It's not where you get your answers. It's where you figure out where you're at in the stream of searching. Like there may never be an end to it. Like you may never have a definitive idea of what exactly a black hole is. And if you go back to the 70s, you're going to get one story. If you time travel then to the 90s, you're going to get another story. If you time travel now, you're going to get a different story.
Well, Shifu was talking about that too, about how certain theories got glamorized even, and then that in and of itself is sort of an institutional bias in the sense that you ended up with these movies like Walt Disney made that movie The Black Hole, which I love that movie. I can remember going to the theater and seeing that movie, Maximilian.
Yes.
And with the spinning blade hands, and all that. And but that kind of became the popularized theory of what a black hole was, and he's like, and that's not even. But so many people, because they saw that, they saw it, put out that way, they've made that attachment in their mind, and in a sense, it's kind of doing a disservice because people are thinking, well, that's already found, we know what that is, and it's not true. We actually don't. He did say though, when you get further along in academia, you figure that out, but to some people, it can even be kind of a culture shock to find out, oh Jesus, everything I've believed about this is completely not only wrong, disproven, and we've thrown that in the trash bin, and we're on to something else now, kind of thing.
I would hope that most people would say to themselves, I realize I haven't really looked into it that deeply. It's okay if it's not what I thought it was. I didn't really look into it deeply anyway. Oh, what exactly is it?
Now, Eric, you can't.
Why not?
No, that doesn't work, man. In society, in general, that doesn't work. We like our tribes. We like our data, to be established, and that way we don't have to think about it ever again. That's,
Hey, everything's chaos anyway.
Sports stuff to watch, man, and gambling to be done. Come on now. Opiates of the masses. We got to get back to that shit.
Sweet, sweet technology.
My biggest turn on has been material science, and I that's one of the, because material science is sort of the road that everything runs on, and there is so much cool shit happening in material science. Now everybody knows about the stuff like foldable screens for their iPhones and all this kind of crap, but there's some really interesting shit going on in material science and like graphene and some of these other super materials that have
buckyballs and stuff.
Oh my God, they have like societal changing ramifications. And this isn't shit that's theorized. Okay, this is Nobel Prizes have been handed out. It's been established. We can manufacture it. It's tough to manufacture. That's the only issue right now. So they're breaking down the barriers and getting to this point where they can start. And I'm talking about graphene specifically here, where they can start manufacturing like graphene powder.
It makes sense, right? Because when I think of a factory, I think of like, they're making parts, or it's a steel factory or a mechanic shop, or when you start talking about these technologies like this, like buckyballs and things like that we're on the edge of and have.
Well, explain what buckyballs are.
Well,
because that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's just it's a carbon ball that I cannot explain right now because because I was going. What was it? I was heading somewhere with that. I don't know. I lost. Oh yeah. Sorry. Just that all these factories that you would think of in your head, like they're not making things like buckyballs, right? Like these are like really small carbon spheres, is what they are essentially, and they're like microscopic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what factory do you know of that's ready to make anything
at the microscopic level? Right.
Yeah. So it's in a way to get these things off the ground. Any of these super material things, you're really going to have new factories.
And new technologies and new ways of manufacturing. Period.
Yeah. So
because when you start talking about like something that's on the microscopic level, that's dust particle wise.
Yeah.
And when you get down that small, you can't just stick that thing in a Tupperware container and ship it and call it good. People don't get that.
Like, and you can't just find it as a piece and assemble it with a machine at a factory. You've got to do something more than that.
I mean, it's carbon, so it's inert. All right. So it isn't like, but you wouldn't want to be breathing that stuff.
No.
Okay. At
Not
all.
on the microscopic dust level.
Everybody's getting coal miner's lung now and stuff from handling, buckyballs. That's the new the new black lung.
They probably wouldn't be sharp little crystals like the coal is, though.
No.
The coal dust. That's terrible.
But you still wouldn't want to be breathing that shit.
No, not at all.
But the point being is that this is all new kind of technology that you got to kind of design
with
to handle
no way
this
of
stuff.
manufacturing out or of convenience
Per se.
or
Yeah.
I mean, like there's nobody that's got enough money to start up 3 factories to make these things.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big undertaking.
It is starting. They are shipping the way they're using graphene powder now, and it's all carbon based, right? Which is amazing because it's the most abundant, element on Earth. So yay.
It combines with anything.
Yeah, and it's completely inert. That's the other. It doesn't really react with anything.
So it hangs out for a while.
You can just throw it in a landfill. So if you had graphene batteries, for instance, it's not like a regular battery. And they're not really batteries; they're capacitors. Which is a whole nother
like the Ark
mind bend. Yeah, like the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, striking down the enemies of God. But the way I've seen it used now is in a powder, and they use it as part of the process of making things like rubber. And so now, the first way I ever saw it used was for like rubber mats for industrial applications. So you end up with these super soft rubber mats that you can walk on that are, really good for your feet and your knees and stuff like that so you don't get those repetitive work injuries and stuff. But they impregnate it with, or they mix it with this graphene powder. So in addition to that, you can't cut this stuff with an axe.
Who makes the graphene powder?
I just saw it. I haven't shared it, but there's some manufacturers that are doing, and it's funny because like a 55-gallon drum of this stuff weighs like, half a pound. Because it's the lightest material known to man, or like one of the lightest materials we manufacture.
Makes me think of Star Trek: The Next Generation,
so,
like when they're in the cargo bay picking up stuff.
Right? Yeah.
Doesn't look heavy.
So that was the first application, was like in these industrial, and it also makes them they can resist extreme temperatures too. So if you drop a hot part or something on it, it's not going to melt it, kind of thing. So I was like, wow, that's nuts, but it's kind of utilitarian. It's like, okay, that's a big deal, but that's not changing my iPhone battery life altering kind of stuff yet. And then using kind of that same ideology, now I saw that they are making soles of CrossFit trainer shoes and boots and stuff with it. So you end up
I'm surprised they're not making phone casings.
Well, who knows? I mean, they're just getting to the point where they're figuring out how to mix this stuff together and vulcanize it. I'm assuming it's still vulcanization, and turn it into a product, But it's malleable, it's injectable, it can be all of those things. So where do you start? And so now the running shoes were really cool because you end up with these shoes that have a really soft rubber sole. So not only are they really good for your, well, I don't know. The jury's out as whether that's better for your feet and stuff or not.
It probably is, at least for your spine.
But
Hills.
but if you're like mountain climbing or doing trail runs and things like that, these things are so soft that they grip. They grip everything.
That's cool.
But then you end up with those same properties: super heat resistant and almost impervious. Like you can't cut these things. You can try to cut them with a knife. The soles of these things are just so durable that you could buy like a pair of these boots and have them for life, kind of thing.
You can just shove it into a leopard's mouth and let them chew on it and escape.
So that was here, eat my shoe.
Yeah.
So that's a more, I guess, societal application that's more widely utilized by more people than a rubber mat in, say, a factory or something like that.
Either way, there's a lot of applications. Like you said, they'll find all kinds of ways to use it. They did Velcro.
It's crazy because it can be turned, like I was saying, it can be turned into a battery. I mean, this stuff is nuts. I can't believe, like, obviously I'm turned on by graphene right now. It's like I said, I'm super into material science, and that being the thing I think has got just massive societal ramifications, and not because of running shoes, but because of things like how we distribute power, how we store power, electricity, and things like that. Getting rid of the chemical batteries altogether. This could completely eliminate the use of chemical batteries because it can be etched in such a way with lasers. Like if you create a piece of paper, like a layer of this stuff, right? It's the material itself is actually only 1 atom thick. So a sheet of paper would be like millions of sheets thick or whatever. But once you've sort of layered this stuff on a substrate, you can etch it with a laser, and you can etch it in such a way that it takes on capacitive properties, which means that it can actually store energy.
Neat.
And like I saw these in a laboratory. These guys had made they had used, believe it or not, a DVD burner in a computer, a CD-ROM burner in a computer, and they used the graphite. They chemically created the graphene with evaporation, and then they etched these patterns onto this thing, and then you could roll this thing up like a tube. Like you could just you could peel it off. They would put it on a CD, put it in the CD-ROM burner, burn the capacitive junctions and everything on it, peel it off afterwards, and then solder on some wires, and boom, they had a battery. And they were like, okay, so this battery could, I'm gonna screw this up, so don't fact check me on this because I could be wrong, but it was something to the magnitude of you could charge your iPhone in 15 seconds.
Jeez. And
the battery would last for 10 days.
Wow.
Okay, so that's not a property, and I say battery, and I'm incorrectly using that because that's not that's the way a capacitor acts, except for the fact that it has the ability to not drain. It stores energy statically for a much longer period of time, and they made this on it's as thick as a sheet of paper and the size of a CD, a compact disc. And that's what they're talking about is the energy storing capacity of these things, right? So I'm looking at that and I'm going, well, Jesus, if you can pour it or if you can make sheets out of it, then you can make anything out of it, right? Because that's how things like fiberglass works. You lay it up in sheets, carbon fiber. It gets applied in layers. It gets its strength
and versatility.
Yeah, because of that, because it's very cloth-like.
Yeah.
And then there's resins and stuff that go into it. So you could have insulative resins and things.
Bulletproof vests.
But if you can make this stuff in sheets, then basically you could turn things like the body of a vehicle into the battery instead of the way we do it now, which is we create a frame. And then the battery is like, the chemical battery is sort of bolted into that. You could actually turn parts of the vehicle itself. The structural integrity of the car could also be part of its battery. So you're talking about removing weight, tremendous amounts of weight from these chemical batteries and things. Now, again, I mean, I'm extrapolating all of this from what I saw, kind of thing. But its ability to do things like that, its ability as a super material, I mean, just the sheets of material are, like half the weight of titanium at 10 times the strength or something like that.
That's crazy, man.
No, I mean it's nuts. It can be made transparent, so you can have something as strong as, stronger than steel that you can see through. This is like Star Trek type shit. Okay, I mean, like, and this is happening. I mean, I have a buddy of mine that's an engineer that I worked with that does visual sorting systems, and I got to work with him, and I got to work with MIT because they actually made the vision system, and my part of that was connecting it to the machine so that it would actually do something constructive. And I was explaining this. I was talking to him on the phone, and I said, I was telling him about this, and he was like, "You're full of shit." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "I would know about this." I'm not. He goes, "You're making this up." And I'm like, "Dude, it really hurt my feelings." I'm like, "What the fuck, man?" Like, I
didn't call you to lie.
What do you think? I'm just blowing sunshine up your ass, right? So I said, "Well, look, here, I'm going to send you a link." And I sent him some links, and it's graphene, graphene. And you start looking at this shit, man, and it'll blow your damn mind. And this is stuff they're doing right now. Like, this isn't wow, if we had this material, we could do these things. No. This material exists. All we're trying to do is figure out how to manufacture it efficiently.
Yeah.
That's it. And there are processes that are already defined for manufacturing. Like, you can create it. They do it in a lab. They do it all the time. Like, technically you can do it with 2 pieces of Scotch tape, and some carbon powder, but that's the thing, is they're just trying to figure out how to make it. And once we sort of cross this material science, and we're crossing it, we're in the process. Like, the whole future of technology and everything is going to change radically.
Yeah, there's going to be it'll affect the electronic world a lot.
It's going to have massive ramifications in things like portable electronics, period.
Yeah, because
solar power, it's carbon. I mean, it's silica, if you want it. You know what I mean? It's like the same material, so it can actually be made into solar panels.
Yeah. That's where I think I first heard about it. Was they had a new invention for solar panels. They had said they had found a way to make them produce a lot more energy and make them thinner and stuff. And I was listening to it. I didn't catch it all, but I didn't realize it was from graphene and stuff. But now that I think back on it and stuff, that must have been what they were talking about, because they had, they started making different kinds of solar panels.
Well, yeah, they increased the surface area of them tremendously.
Yeah.
That was a big part of it, was by etching them. That was one of the things I seen, or etching them or cutting them in such a way that it had, instead of just being smooth, flat, they purposely etched them in such a way that they had grooves.
Yeah.
So that technically increases the surface area, which increases the amount of energy that can be absorbed through that surface, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they
and directional too. I think it made a difference in the direction of the sun.
Yep.
Like it caught more energy.
It was less of an issue because they put like pyramids, like tons of tiny little pyramids, so the sun it could pick the light up from all kinds of different
pyramids
angles.
are important.
Yeah, well, we
always
know. Especially ones that have a chamber they haven't discovered
all of them.
No, but to your point, right? So they can lay this stuff up in such a way, or create this stuff in such a way that it's transparent. So the ideology there is you take these massive office buildings and shit that are in cities, you just put it on the window.
Batteries.
You put it on the windows.
Yeah.
And then you bring all that back down to an inverter. You convert that back into AC. Boom. You're helping to either power the building.
Energy.
Yeah, it's free.
Free and clean.
Well, free in the sense, you still got the material costs.
Free for 5 billion years.
So, I haven't even gotten into the fact that it can become like a filter. You can make it. You can laser etch it in such a way that it only you can. Specifically take
frequencies of light or something.
No, a filter for like liquids.
Oh,
like you can separate it. You can make it in such a way that it filters out very specific particles from fluids. So its ability to like filter ultra pure water and things like that is crazy. So there's ramifications in things like desalinization. I guess
that makes sense. Yeah.
It just goes on and on and on. Like I said, I'm really geeked out about graphene.
That's cool, man. It's really cool.
But God, I want my hover car. That's all I want. I want my jetpack, and I want my hover car and my lightsaber. Until some bitch can pull that off, man. I don't.
We have not reached the future.
No, we're not there. Sorry. Nope. No, I need a hover car. I need a jetpack and a hover car and a lightsaber. I got to cut some bitches down.
Well, maybe we're going to be closer to building those things.
So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting how something that is going to have those kinds of ramifications. I mean, massive societal ramifications. We haven't even begun to kind of process this stuff as a society because, I mean, we're still trying to do shit like build walls. Okay, I mean, like, there are things that are coming from science, material science, medicine, that are like render most of this other stuff just a moot point. You know, if you're not fighting over resources anymore, if nobody's fighting over resources, what do we fight about? I mean,
religion.
That would be it. It would just be things like religion and ideology.
Well,
but
it'll be there.
But we're rapidly approaching a society that does not have to struggle for things like energy and resources anymore. Even food could be automated.
And we'll be able to bend this new technology to the new war that we have for religion.
Sad to say, but that's probably the only fucking way we're getting lightsabers.
Yeah.
Right.
You gotta be a mystic knight to have a lightsaber. You gotta believe. You can't just have a lightsaber.
What are you gonna do, man? I want my lightsaber. I want a double-ended lightsaber. Sorry, I just do. I'll kill myself with it. Probably cut I'll probably end up cutting my own leg off or some shit. That's what'll end up happening.
Yeah, that would happen to me too.
Remember that when you were a kid and you got your first pair of nunchucks?
Did you? Yeah, it was like, yeah. But I got ones with foam on them and corkwood, so they weren't terrible.
You went the safe way.
Yeah, somebody got them for me. I don't remember who it was though. But I would hit myself a lot of times with a stick though.
Look, what you do in your private time.
Not with my stick, with a stick.
Well, again, what you do in your private time, it's what they call self-flagellation or whatever.
Well, it wasn't intentional. I was trying to learn how to twirl it. And occasionally I would hit myself.
Over and over. Was you a bad boy?
No. It wasn't that often. I hit myself like 5 or 6 times pretty bad. That wasn't bad. In about a year and a half period of time until I learned how to do it. Hit my dog once accidentally. I was out there doing my private time stuff, and the dog's like, "Hey, what's he doing?" Hey, bam! Oh, yeah! I'm like, oh my god! I'm sorry! Oh my god! I was like, felt terrible.
Your dog has to suffer because you want to be a ninja master, right?
Yeah, right. It was just like, hey, he's gonna play with me.
No, he's gonna hit me with a stick.
Yep. Trying his ninja master stuff.
There's a lot of truth in that, man. Pain is the best teacher, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. I mean, I certainly learned where to swing that thing where it didn't hit me.
I'm not saying it's the only teacher.
Well, you've seen it, right?
Yeah.
I
used to do it in the parking lots of the places.
It's like, people think like you took martial arts or something. Like, I was just learning. Just did this one
You'd have been, not only could you be confused for a wizard martial artist, you could be, what do they call those people, the flag people, that the marching band that spin the flags around and all.
Well, that's what I was thinking of, man, because like I didn't feel like it had any martial practicality to it.
Not really.
So I actually looked at it more like that. But I didn't do it for that reason, though. I did it because me and a bunch of friends all did this sort of a thing. It was like a weird kind of hobby. It eventually developed into a kind of a score game, which is like or an SCA event, where like I would go down to
the Society for Creative Anachronism.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like they dress up like wizards and run around and attack each other.
No, there's no wizards in SCA. SCA attempts to recreate medieval times, but like legitimate medieval times.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they also battle and stuff, and they have like regulations for what kind of armor and weapons that they use, but they do like hand-to-hand melee combat.
I've been sharing a bunch of this these guys. What the hell is it called?
There's a game called Score.
No. This is from. It's a martial art, man. It's a European martial art. It's a form of. They've classified this. It's a form of medieval European martial arts.
Oh, okay, yeah, like where they're doing large two-handed claymore sword type things.
Oh man, them bitches are crushing each other. Man.
So you know how that got started?
Uh-uh.
Somebody found some medieval manuscripts, like training manuscripts, and they were just diagrams. But they looked at these diagrams, and they were able to tell what the diagrams were showing that you would do with this giant weapon. Like, we never really knew
how they there's no video.
No, there's no video or nothing, right? Like, but you would assume they swing it like a sword, right? But apparently, it's a bit more acrobatic than that. Yeah, there's a bit of, like, momentum
around
that you
their
build
waist
up with it and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. So now, like you said, man, there's people over there. And then, of course, there's those people that's jousting, too.
It's all part of the same... Same thing.
Yeah, but, it's crazy.
They get into, like, rings, army against army, with freaking battle axes and claymores and hammers and just fucking go at it, man.
Keeping the medieval days alive.
Oh, my God. You watch these videos, but these dudes just getting wrecked, shield smashing them. They turn the shield up on the side and jam it into somebody's helmet and stuff. And just bam, 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 bam. I'm like, God damn.
Yeah, that's way more violent than the SCA. The SCA tends to be a bit more less violent, but these guys are like, I've seen some of these guys, they get hurt.
Well, one of the funny things is that every time I've seen videos of these events, like they're compilation videos, and I share them on the No Shitcast fairly frequently because I just get such a kick out of them. Not as much as the people chasing cheese down the hill. That God, I about died with that. Have you ever seen that video?
I think I've seen it once.
Oh my God! And it's I think it's in Sweden because it's Swiss cheese, which would make sense. But they roll these wheels of cheese down this. It ain't a hill. This is a cliff with less of an attitude. Okay,
serious cheese damage and cheese speed.
And the cheese is, and these people are chasing this down this hill and just. Like, man, how good is that cheese?
That's
dude?
why we don't get visited by aliens, you know.
Yeah, they see this shit and go, nah.
Yeah, we can pass these guys up.
But the compilation videos with the guys fighting in armor and stuff, they always seem to enjoy putting the videos of the ambulances leaving at the end of it. Like the string of ambulances is taking
just people. To show you how well they won. Like, we actually won. These guys got to leave in an ambulance.
In an ambulance, you know? I mean, I guess when you have a free healthcare system, you know, that's fine.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But they just beat the shit out of each other, man. I'm like, damn, I thought mixed martial arts was violent. And this is like 20 on 20 type stuff. And then there's this dude, I can't remember what they call him, like the Bulgarian Ninja or some shit like that. There's one guy that's really stood out, and they do like the one-on-one combat and stuff like that too. That's really like has jumped out as the guy. Like, he's the Dark Knight, literally,
cool.
of this whole thing. And I've watched some videos of him fighting, man, and this guy is just insane, you know. And it's full speed, full contact. You know, the only thing they do is they blunt the weapons. That's it.
Just so they're not actually killing somebody with a stroke.
Right, you're not. Yeah, but
one stroke.
But you can still jam.
Yeah.
You just
the potential's still there. It's just not assured like it would be if it was a weapon.
So you're talking about weapons that are designed to be slammed together at full strength and not break, and that's what they're hitting each other with. Yeah. So people are just out there and just getting mauled, man. You know, they take like I think they take like a motorcycle helmet. Was like, because there's like vintage versions of this too. I've noticed the armor has gotten much better and much
again,
much better
necessity.
Yeah,
we need better armor, guys.
And because at first they were just like taking motorcycle helmets and bolting some aluminum on it and calling that a helmet, and then some, you know, you'd see these guys, man, with a hammer to the head, and it would just crush those things in. And I'm going, God, what the hell are you people doing?
Oh, man.
That's brutal. If you can ever get a chance, I would encourage you to check it out.
Yeah,
it's all
me a
over
couple
YouTube.
of links.
It's all on the No Shitcast.
Okay, well,
I share it all on the Facebook and the Instagram and all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, it's nuts. I love it. I just get such a kick out of that kind of shit. People wrecking each other. Well, fail blog videos have always been kind of my favorite. People
absolutely
hurting themselves doing stupid shit. You know?
I like it. I like the people that's messing around with the running of the bulls in Spain, just like messing with Mother Nature, and then just get trampled, like willingly. Oh yeah, it's okay if I get trampled. I'm gonna smack this bull up.
See, this is why I think chasing cheese down a hill is so much better than that.
Please do it to elaborate.
Why is people chasing cheese down a hill my most favorite thing to watch in the world? Why do I laugh so hard? Because when you're running the bulls, they often, because they're on cobblestone streets, the bulls are always falling down and stuff like that, and they're just scared shitless. Like, what the hell's going on? And, so that's the bulls. And people get mauled, and I appreciate that. I love that the people get ran over and think that that's gored and all those kind of things. But there's still that component of the wild animal or the poor animal that's in there. Like, okay, when people chase cheese down a hill, the only people that get hurt are the people chasing. The only thing that gets hurt is the people chasing the cheese down the hill. Okay, so I find that oddly so much more pure somehow. Okay, because it's not even like it's so much a hey y'all watch this kind of thing more than running
the
from
cheese
the bowl.
Is just an excuse to throw yourself off a cliff.
Oh my God!
I gotta go get that cheese.
And somebody, the video that I put together,
cheese chaser,
shared it, filmed it in slow motion. Oh. Just
hopefully with some kind of operatic sort of a thing.
Oh yeah. I put music to it for sure. Yeah, it is God Almighty, man. Just watching these people wreck themselves chasing cheese. I bet it's some good cheese. It's got to be some good damn cheese. But after it bounces down a hill, I don't know if you'd want to eat it.
I think. Well, do they have it like waxed up like they do with wheels and stuff?
It's moving so fast in the video.
Hard to see.
And I think it's in Switzerland, so that's why I'm assuming that it's Swiss cheese.
Well, Bob, the readings we've taken on the cheese as it passes indicate that there is a wax sealant around the cheese, apparently.
We're going to cut that back in slow motion here. Here's where the cheese bounces, and here's where this gentleman loses his teeth as he kicks himself in the face, It's brutal, man.
One of my last classes was a American Revolutionary History class that was centered around whether or not the United States was made as a Christian nation. And I was reading the textbook, and just they were talking about the subject matter, and then just randomly they mentioned that the head of this congregation, this preacher of a congregation, when Thomas Jefferson came to their town, gave him a 1,200-pound block of cheese.
Oh, I heard
as a
this.
gift. Yeah, it was like a little over 1,200 pounds. Yeah, which is like a random statement in the book, and it just made me laugh. And we were in class, and nobody mentioned it. I'm like, hold on,
wait, rewind that a little bit.
Let's talk about this 1,200-pound cheese thing that was mentioned here. I've got to highlight it in the book. What's up with that? I went to the library, and they actually had a kid's book on it.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like a kid's book talking about
this block of cheese.
Yeah, that was given to Thomas Jefferson.
I think we talked about this, but we did.
Did we?
Yeah, I think it was in the last time you were on the. It was just you and me on the show.
It's amazing. It's the cheese chasing, gift giving, munchy cracker object. It's cheese.
Jesus Christ!
Ain't easy being cheesy.
It isn't.
I love cheese, actually.
It's tough, man.
Are you going to write down cheese for one of the things we talked about?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good. Because I want that to be like what people can see. Like, hey, they're talking about cheese.
I was going to ask you this because I was watching H&A. It's Conspiracy Friday.
Is it?
Yeah. So it's like my wife and I call it Conspiracy Friday. I don't know. The History Channel doesn't call it that, but every Friday they do like a marathon of ancient aliens, right? So I had that on, and they were talking about Elon Musk's new neuronet thing. How augmented humanity or whatever?
Augmented reality?
Well, no. What's that called when you
transhumanism
kind of thing? And I was wondering how that would work with like our whole discussions on Orc-OR, like what that would mean, right?
I guess it would depend upon what exactly was involved in their transhumanities.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that's like a big topic, and when I think of it, I think of people that's re-sleeving themselves into robots or other biological bodies and things like that. But I mean,
because here's where this crosses, right? Because if we believe that your consciousness is nothing more than your memories, data, and like a complex, and it all exists inside this big complex mathematical formula, that should be able to be copied.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if that's not where consciousness actually lies, then that would be one way that you would be able to prove that.
Yeah.
Or at least establish it, right? So that's kind of where my brain went with it. It was like,
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, so the question is, what happens in the human brain that allows this function to occur?
Right.
Can you transport that mechanism into a mechanical mechanism?
Right.
In the brain, the mechanism is a chemical called cytosine, and it takes a liquid and gel-like state. In the gel-like state, it acts as a insulator against dissidence, the second law of thermodynamics, and then in the liquid state, it helps to propagate biochemical energy.
Right.
And this cytosine is on the or on the synaptic circuits between the neuronodes of the brain. So if you could come up with a way of containing the constant collapsing of the wave function, which is your constant stream of consciousness, if you could keep that going and then move that over into another object that would still protect the biochemical energy from dissidence,
right,
then there's no reason why you couldn't do it. And then that would mean that it probably would actually be easier, because you wouldn't be taking a program and moving it to another computer and hoping it worked in this way. You'd literally be moving the phenomenon from one thing to another thing. Or, barring that, if you could just find a way to put a brain into a machine, you're good to go, and you don't have to worry about it, right? So
it's kind of human beings or any animal, right? Because we can take a machine apart and leave it in a box in pieces for years.
Yeah.
And then go put it all back together, and it'll probably work.
Yeah.
But you can't do that with
people,
with animals, people. You can take them completely apart, but if you put them all back together, they don't work anymore.
No, but that's a frailty of our body,
yeah.
And if we could get rid of that, then.
But that's kind of what you're talking about. Is that if you could transfer that, but what happens to you would have to do it, and then what end? Or you're copying yourself. Then now you have two instances of the same consciousness.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. If either way, no, you wouldn't copy anything. If you just implanted a brain into a machine, then you wouldn't be copying anything. If you just move that brain from one machine to another, assuming that brains don't age as long as they're nutrient fed and stuff, right? So if you're talking about taking the phenomenon that happens in the brain and moving that to a machine, you're still not making a copy. You're just taking that entangled energy, and you're moving it from a brain to someplace else. Yes, but that energy is still entangled. Those quantum functions are still entangled, and it's that entangled property of those subatomic particles that is the you. That's you. So that can never be separated ever. Even when you die, that's not separated. It's just that you've lost your body, and you've lost all your senses, and you've lost the ability to relate to the chemicals in a linear time stream. So when you take all of that away, that's like 99% of the human experience as we define the human experience. But what is essentially you will never dissipate if it's entangled. So you just got to keep those entangled things together, that entangled particles together, long enough to move it to another machine. And, that's essentially the LHC is taking atoms and suspending them.
Large Hadron Collider in CERN.
Yeah.
Yeah, at CERN.
Yeah. They're taking individual particles and smashing them into other particles, but before they do that, they spin them around and get them going really fast. And the way they do that is they have a magnetic field, and this particle is suspended in the magnetic field, and that's how they control it. So if you could take a magnetic field that was capable of sustaining this function that's occurring and move that to the machine and then release the magnetic field into the machine, which would have to have the same functions as the brain and what's going on there, then you wouldn't be copying anything. You would only be copying something if you were,
you really wouldn't be.
You really wouldn't be copying, yeah. And when they talk about quantum teleportation and quantum tunneling, that's taking two entangled particles and doing something to one place and having that thing change in another place. And so people have theorized that when you go through a transporter, that you're being made a copy. But I don't think. I don't know. You could. I mean, if you were using that as the basis, like if you could quantumly entangle every particle in your body, which I don't even know how that would work, but if you could, and you were entangled with some particles other places, assumably they would be dispersed throughout the universe until you use that transporter to make them come together as a copy of yourself someplace else, then maybe that would be the case, and you would have a copy of yourself. But I'm talking about like the essence of like the soul, which is much smaller than having every particle in your body.
Well, it really makes me what's going to happen here, because according to Elon Musk, this company, this neuronet company, has already done this, where they've been able to connect people's brains to these computers, and not. I mean, he's talking like in the creepy, being able to learn things by just plugging in type way. Not
that's like a Johnny Mnemonic thing, though.
Yeah,
that's like plugging in and having maybe extra memory in your
Matrixy,
head.
kind of ideology. Again, I listened to him talk about it a little bit on a podcast, and then the rest of the information I got is from Ancient Aliens. So let's take this all with a grain of salt, obviously. But the fact of the matter is I know that they're working on this, and I know this is something that's coming. I mean, he said it's coming this year, where this is going to actually happen. So that's kind of where I come down on this, is like, once we start doing this kind of stuff where we're embedding technology into our brains, if that's what it actually is, I don't know, it could be a helmet for all I freaking know, with some, I don't know, whatever. But
I'm okay with the embedding of technology in my brain or any part of my body, but I worry a little bit about artificial intelligence. I don't believe that artificial
just sort of hit me. There's somebody somewhere who thinks that this is the mark of the beast.
That what is?
This when we start in bet, because it was always about those. Did you ever see those conspiracy theories about the RFID chips that they were going to put in people, and how that was the actual the biblical mark of the beast, and that's going to be the end of the world and stuff. Yeah,
I knew about
because everybody would get a number. And it'd be a unique number, because every RFID chip would be serialized.
Like aside from the numbers we already have that are unique.
Oh, don't even get me started, man.
I
didn't say I believed it.
No,
okay?
I know.
I just said
making sure I understand.
So somewhere, somebody who doesn't ever send text messages is freaking out about the thought of embedding a computer in your brain.
It's okay to have a social security number. I just don't want it inside me.
Yeah, transhumanism.
Oh man, I don't think that artificial intelligence is the same thing as human intelligence. And I don't think it ever will be.
Why?
Because I don't believe that that's how
Elon Musk says we got to be careful, because our robotic overlords could eventually take us over.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of intelligence. It's still intelligent. It's just not human intelligence. It doesn't arrive at the same way. Even if intelligence emerges, even if self-awareness emerges as an emergent property from complexity, even if that is the case, in my mind, that's just another way of achieving the end, and is not the same mechanism that's working within us. And it's neither here nor there. But yeah, I worry about artificial intelligence. There's artificial intelligences have so far, at least what I know, and I'm not like digging into it every day or anything, but I know that one had invented its own language and started running subroutines to do things and stuff, and they had to find and hunt down the codes to get it to start working properly.
They shut it off.
Yeah,
first, right? There was two.
Yeah, but they had to figure out what was going
AI
on.
that were talking to each other,
Yeah.
and they went. Screw it with this barbaric bullshit language you guys gave it. We're going to create our own language. It's
and we're
going to
move forward, right?
Yeah.
Without saying anything to anyone, because there's no programming probably in it to say, hey, if this event happens, contact us.
Well, you don't necessarily know what they're saying either.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, but you could have programmed an event to say that if you ever develop your own language, you will shut down or you will contact us or something. You know.
Well, doesn't that kind of support the premise, though, that there is at least some form of consciousness that resides in complexity?
Well, that's why. I say
that's all that is, right?
Well, no. I don't think it's consciousness. I think that it's intelligence.
Oh, you gotta elaborate.
Well, consciousness is being self-aware, and also includes empathy and chemical reactions that produce feelings like serotonin, dopamine, and things like that. Machines don't have any of that. And they never can have any of that as long as they're a machine, unless they start hybriding into human like we hybrid into them. So,
well, that's what's going to happen, right?
Maybe.
I mean, that would be the logical conclusion, or the logical path there would be, as we integrate more technology more into humanity. Conversely, what's happening is technology is integrating humanity more into itself.
Yeah.
You know, there's a convergence, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's optimum. Transhumanism, yeah.
No, the logic of transferable associations. Like, if this is true, then the opposite also has to be true, kind of.
I don't know. I think that's the optimum thing, though, is that there's a blending. I think that would be optimum, but I don't think you need self-awareness to want to do things like preserve your body or yourself. You know, I think that intelligence that could emerge out of complexity is enough to contain the aspects of self-awareness. You know, artificial intelligences would still want to protect themselves, may still have programs that they would run to protect themselves or things like that, you know, or be able to invent things to further their own ends. I think that's just a property of intelligence. But it doesn't include things like empathy, and it doesn't include like chemical reactions, so it loses that human component at that point. And the decisions that are made by the artificial intelligences, I assume, would not in any way be based on any type of feeling or past experiences as far as how it felt, you know, just based on data, just straight up data.
Yeah, I've often wondered, because basically all AI is right now is code, right? There's nothing more to it than that. It's just scripts and it's look, you know, where it derives reactions based on stimuli. Okay, it may not do it the exact same way every time, because there is this concept of fuzzy logic that gives things variability.
Kind of like life too, if it can produce its own code to come up with like a different language and stuff like that, you know, it could reproduce itself. I mean, if it's code itself and it can make code, that's reproducing.
But even then, it's still just derivative. It's just all it's doing. So everything should be, technically speaking, mostly predictable, because you should be able to see that flow throughout the logic patterns of the code.
I don't know, man. Like when you talk.
See, this is the thing, right? Because we talked about this before. It's machines are great in a sense that machines are extremely predictable. It's organic things that are not predictable. Nature's not even. Well, I mean, nature's kind of predictable, but it's really not. But especially people, they're not predictable.
People's
at all.
Not predictable because of feelings most of the time. You just don't know how someone's feeling.
But
exactly.
You're saying that that's kind of the that's the unique trait that would separate is the ability to have that feeling stimuli.
Yeah.
So it isn't just about past experiences, data, you know.
No, it's how you feel at a given moment. I mean, just take any time you've really been angry and somebody has come up to you who you don't know or anything, and they ask you something and you snap at them. I mean, that's a reaction that you gave based on how you felt they had nothing to do with.
That's because in the classical sense of any time they show in literature or fantasy, fiction and stuff like that, TV shows in Hollywood, whenever they seem to show robots, if you will, or AI, artificial intelligence, that's the thing that they always seem to be missing. Like Data from Star Trek didn't have feelings.
Yeah.
I mean, he got him later. He was a big boy, and he turned into
But there's like a special chip, though. It had to be programmed in. It didn't develop on his own.
He didn't develop it on his own.
No.
So, but that's one of the things, like in iRobot and the Alien movies and things like that. These they're machines. They don't have the capacity to be afraid or angry or sad, or they're emotionless.
If you consider that, and you talk about those computers that made their own code to make their own language to communicate with each other, and that we didn't know exactly what they were saying before we stopped it, then that almost implies that there is emergent properties there, because if they weren't programmed to do that, how did they come up with the idea amongst themselves to do that? If they weren't programmed, like maybe they were programmed to talk and exchange information, but no one said do it by creating. I mean, that's the mind-boggling thing, right? You could have said do it efficiently, and you would have suspected that the machine would have done everything it could within its programming to do it efficiently, to exchange information.
Because part of the script, and you can teach machines to learn. We do that all the time. Okay, we say we can tell a machine, even simple machine, comparatively speaking, which would be simple machines. Okay, we can say if I'm based on feedback, if I'm doing something, I can apply a more. Let's say it's a cutting machine. Okay, and it's cutting something, and I can monitor how much energy it's taking to turn that blade, and I can say things like, okay, after once this blade is dull, because how much energy it's taking for it to do the same job in the same amount of time, go over to this other station and sharpen yourself. Okay, now that's something that's a variable. I don't know based on what? Based on the density of the material. If say I'm cutting wood, because this is where this happens, and then the blade will literally go over and go to another station and sharpen itself in these big sawmills and stuff. But that variable, what wood am I cutting? How hot is it outside? What's the temperature? How much moisture is in this material? Like, all these things are variables that are going to change constantly. Okay, but I can monitor that, and I can look at that over time, and I can make that machine start doing things like sharpening itself before it actually gets dull and constantly.
But you got to program those variables in.
But I have to teach them. I have to tell the machine to learn from the environment.
Yes.
So in this particular case, these AI were both told to not only communicate, but to also, they had algorithmically programmed the ability to listen and derive what was being said. But both of them had it. And all they did was follow their logical function, was to find the most efficient way to communicate with each other. So that was in there. That wasn't it wasn't like it was a big surprise that these things started talking to each other and coming up with they were taught to learn, okay, and to store this data and to incorporate new data and variables into their algorithm. Okay, that's still predictable, even though it's unpredictable. It was told to do that. So that wasn't the part that, it wasn't like they gained consciousness and went, yeah, we're gonna. But that's the way it looked for sure to people that are looking in from the outside.
Why did they stop it?
Because they couldn't figure out what they were saying to each other anymore, so they stopped it.
But why would that be a problem?
I don't know. It freaked people out.
But why do you think the people who programmed the variables in the machine and knew what it was capable of, and if those people weren't surprised that this machine had developed a different kind of language, then why would they be surprised?
No, I don't. Remember, this was done in labs and shit. So what are we doing? I'm reading these articles that are coming out in publications with people that are, again, interpreting a white paper through their own lens. So I don't know that the lab people, I guess I should say for sure, I don't know if the lab people and stuff were freaking out about this or not. I don't know.
No, they shut it off.
But they did. Well, they stopped it, but I don't know if they stopped it because it was part of the process that if this happened, they were going to stop it so that they could go back and look at and figure out what they were. I don't know. Okay,
well, that's a good question because
there's probably more to that. There's always more to this shit than than what you get from because I've only looked at this through the lens of the mainstream media and things like that.
Right.
Like it's funny every time I get articles. It's so funny. I was talking to maybe it was you. I was talking to somebody else about this, but I'm constantly getting anytime a machine does something.
I think you were telling. Yeah.
Yeah. I get the messages. It's like. Are you? No.
Hey, man, is this machine supposed to be doing this? Hold on, let me check. Can you describe what it's doing again?
Yeah. Well, give me a laptop and the code, and I can get in here and kind of tell you what it's doing and why it's doing it. But trust me, I've yet in 25 years of programming machines and automation and things like that, I have yet to see a machine do something that I couldn't explain.
But
not once.
But that's the bad part, man. Like you could make a machine that will do something, and it might, if you let it go, affect you, and it might be bad. I mean, even if it's predictable, it still might not be a good idea. I mean, if you had a computer system that had an artificial intelligence, and just like say with these machines that was talking to each other, even if you knew that certain things might occur and you accept that and say, okay, I'm going to let these things continue to talk to each other and see what happens, and you follow this experiment and you realize that what's happening is they're becoming self-aware and all of this, right? So say you go with this because you want to study it, you want to keep these things monitored and stuff. At some point you could turn over enough power to something like that it would be able to make decisions that you wouldn't want to make and be in a bad position.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean when I say I worry about artificial intelligence. I'm worried about if we develop it to a good point that people will willingly turn over their...
Well, it's already happening. It's hey Siri, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's all happening. I'm surprised my phone didn't pick up, but that's all already happening, right? It's that we're already relinquishing control of. Well, we talked about this. Remember when we talked about Google Assistant?
Yeah.
And we played the audio back. It was back like 25 podcasts ago or something like that. I just saw an article. Google Assistant will now translate like 28 languages in real time. We got to find out if Bulgarian's one of them.
Yeah.
Oh, wouldn't that be a fun podcast?
I think so.
That might be anyway, down a rabbit hole. We got somebody we were trying to get on the show for their specific knowledge of OrcOR. So shout out to Nicolay. And there's a little bit of a language barrier, so we're trying to figure out the best way to kind of work with him. And I never thought about that. Boy, if that handles real time, but that's okay. So going down a wormhole here, but nonetheless, Google Assistant translates. It's 16. I can't remember the number. It's an insane amount of languages in real time.
I'm still for them studying artificial intelligence. It worries me a little bit, but I still would be like, yeah, man, don't unplug that.
Well, what worries me about that is this is machines translating language. Right now, people do that, and people are much better at picking up inference. You know what I'm saying? So when we know this, right? So when you translate languages, it could be two completely different words based on the mood of.
But
will Google Translate pick that up?
But people are really bad at the translation into their own vernacular if there's not a direct translation. That's how that whole Red Sea,
Holy Bible.
got
sorry.
started. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly where you went, right?
Yeah. I mean, just thinking of all of the various erroneous translations of vernacular that the Bible has went through as it's went from one language to another. There's also human error to be considered. And
that would be interesting to see.
Google Translate some of that.
Well,
shit.
I bet it's got to already be happening.
I don't know.
I bet
Sometimes those people are touchy about that stuff. Not everybody. I think didn't they stop all the research on the Dead Sea Scrolls or something? I don't know if that's true or not, but I think I heard that.
Well, not that I've heard, but
something
it doesn't mean it's not true.
They won't let people back in anymore. They do it every so often. Like you can't go and close to Stonehenge now. You used to be able to walk up and touch the sarsen stones and stuff, and you can't. What else? You can't. Some other place that they shut down too that you can't go anymore. Can't remember now.
Weird.
Yeah.
It's the end of the world stuff, man. That's what it is.
What?
Well, they're shutting off all these religious sites and closing down all the national parks and everything.
They're closing religion down.
Just making some shit up.
God has shut the celestial government down.
That begs the question.
Priests have been laid off. It's not good.
I bet this has happened already, where they've taken like Greek texts and ran them through character, software. To do translations.
Yeah, and some people really don't like that. Like, there's the other side of that where I've heard them say that to some extent these people are matching these up with the logarithm and stuff, but that they don't know, right? It may not be that letter. They're just speculating, and they're putting it there, and that's a holy text, and they're changing it in that fashion. It's not good. So, and I think that's what was at the root of, if I was right about the Dead Sea Scrolls, I think that was at the root about why they didn't want people doing it anymore. They got to a point where people were using software to figure out what some of the faded scrolls were saying, and some hardcore Orthodox Jewish people didn't want that because they wanted to do it because, they spend their whole lives interpreting and reading the Torah from their bar mitzvah onward. So they're kind of like specialists, It
should be both. That's what bothers me, because it should be both.
Yeah,
both should be as readily available.
I think the software should give ideas to those guys, and then I think that they should make that decision too. Or people who study alphabets.
Yeah,
I mean, I think either one of those two, because
there's a sound argument for both. Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But nobody.
I would use machines and software if it was me.
I don't think any one interpretation should be valued as the only interpretation, especially when it comes to translating ancient texts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless you can hang out with the person that was
writing
it.
So anybody that can just go in and flip a switch and say, nope, no more of this, that bothers me, in the sense that I just want to have both. I'm not saying that they're invaluable or that they're not valuable. I'm not saying that. I know that they're valuable because of that interpretation over time and stuff. But I don't think it should be the only version of the truth.
There are a lot of new advancements with satellite archaeology and underwater archaeology.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of things being discovered in the future on the edges of the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, the Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf. There's going to be a lot of discoveries in those places, underwater villages, houses, things like that.
It's already happening.
Yeah, it has a little bit. Yeah, there's going to be a lot.
They're
more.
Pulling like those it's Egyptian looking. It is Egyptian.
Yeah,
stuff.
in Alexandria most of the time in the bay.
Like those big columns and statues and stuff, and they're pulling up writings that haven't been exposed. They're in perfect shape. They can clean them up, and there it is. Boom, like Rosetta Stone level kind of stuff. I think too.
And there's going to be a lot of discoveries with satellite archaeology, because they're able to see dried up riverbeds. They're able to see unused.
Well, that laser shit that they've been using down in South America from airplanes.
Oh yeah, for the Mayan.
It's like just peeling the jungle back.
Yeah,
I was like,
that's another way too. Yeah. Yeah, with the satellite photography, though, you can find trade routes, too. Old trade routes that are no longer. That's how they found the ancient city of Ubar, which is mentioned.
Not just a ride-sharing program.
That's right, Ubar. They found that because they were able to find the trade routes with a satellite that no longer existed. They still could see them. So, and that's how they believe that they found Eden, was because they found the other two dried up riverbeds, the Gihon, the Pihon.
It's kind of a crazy time, right? Because there's some real paradigm shifting shit happening, not only in science and material science and all this other stuff, but in ancient history too. And I was like freaking out when I heard about Göbekli Tepe the first time.
Yeah,
I was like, man, this it broke all of the rules, all of them. It was too old, too intricate, too complex. It was just too everything for where it should be. But there it is, and boom, bitches, now deal with it. And now with what's happening in South America, which is another thing that has me totally geeking out, is with that laser. They're scanning with lasers, and they're able to kind of penetrate down through the canopy of the overgrowth, and they're finding massive cities and roads and like highway level trade roads and things. It's like, oh, geez, here we go.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of work ahead for archaeologists.
And South America is interesting too, because it's an ancient culture built on top of another ancient culture, right? There's two. There's the Mayans, and then there's the
Mayans, the Aztecs. And there's the Olmecs too.
And the Olmecs.
And they
huge societies too. Not like massive societies, millions and millions of people.
Yeah. They're spread out at different times in different places, but they're all there in Latin America.
Yep.
I took a Latin American history class, but it was only from like when the Europeans went over and took over essentially up to the modern day. So I really wish I could have got the other half of that. But
where are you on Dune?
Oh God. Well, so far, for the first time, I've read the Butlerian Jihad, and the Battle of Corin, and the Mentats of Dune, and I'm about halfway through the Sisterhood of Dune. And then after that's like Navigators of Dune.
So I just saw, I think it's Sci-Fi is going to be dropping that.
Yeah, I joined a Dune Facebook group, like right when I started reading them, and then that stuff dropped, and now that's all it is people suggesting actors. It's just hilarious.
Now, this is often regarded as the greatest science fiction book ever written, kind of thing. So, I mean, a lot of people regard this as, if not the one of the greatest science fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, way out there past, anything L. Ron Hubbard did.
It's either this or Foundation trilogy. Those are the two main ones that I've always heard. But I've not read the Foundation trilogy.
No.
And I think there's more books in that, much like there is with the Dune series and stuff.
So it looks like they're going to do this in like 3 parts, or at least 2.
Like 3 movies?
It's not going to. Let me rephrase that. It's not going to be on Sci-Fi. What I read was that it's going to be in movies. That's right.
What I thought.
It's movies, and they're going to do a multi-part movie for the one book.
Wow.
They have to. They're gonna. I think they're going to do it in 2 parts.
See, I've never read that book yet.
Oh, you'll understand, because it's too completely, because it's all about traveling to the planet Dune. So there's the whole part of them on the water planet. I think it's called Arrakis, and then
no, that's Dune.
Arrakis. That's right. Yeah, Dune is Arrakis. Yes. So the water planet Caladan, and that all the political intrigue and all the crazy stuff that's going on there, and then there's this trip to this completely polar opposite, no pun intended, planet that has its own
ecosystem
and its own geopolitical issues with these freemen that are like running around in the desert and stuff. So it's good that they're breaking it in half. It's going to make it a lot easier for people to get.
I've seen.
It's going to kind of be like the first movies though is probably going to end on like a down note, and then you see the fruition of it through the second movie. Yeah,
I've seen the David Lynch extended version.
Yeah,
and the sci-fi director's cut version, and the sci-fi sequel to the director's cut version, Children of Dune.
Okay.
I've talked with a lot of people who have read the book and have told me about the book and what they felt about the book.
It's very cult-like, isn't it?
Man? Yeah. Heard about it, right? So when I went to actually read the book, I couldn't read it. I just couldn't.
Because you had everybody else's
ideas and philosophies,
their
and
interpretations.
Including the movies and things. And then it was like, man, I know all of this. Like it wasn't really revealing anything that I didn't know. If it wasn't in the movie, someone said, what's not in the movie? And they would tell me, right?
Yeah.
So I knew the story, and I knew that like the main character originally was Dr. Kynes, and it was about ecology, and I knew even that at that time that Frank Herbert was going somewhere, and to write a article about these people who were trying to keep these sand dunes from encroaching over this road, and that's how he got the idea and stuff. So I knew so much about it and stuff, and I'd watched also that documentary, Jaworski's Dune.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that yet. I started watching it, but it was too far out there.
It's pretty weird, man. But yeah, so I mean, like I've hit it from a lot of angles, and so I thought what I would do, against everybody's recommendation, because nobody wanted me to start with these books chronologically, because that's his son that wrote the books along with a guy who wrote Star Wars books, right?
Okay.
So I had to start like that, though, because I needed momentum. I wanted to have momentum so that when I hit that first Dune book, I would be interested more. And I was convinced if I got past the first book, I would still like all the other books and stuff, right? So I need momentum to break through. So I've been reading these books and stuff, and I think it's going to happen because, I got to see how the Juice Sappho got to be brought into the story originally. I got to see the first Mentat and how that happened and why it happened. The Battle of Corin, like all these things that's only hinted at in the first book. Like I got to go through a lot of those things, and I think that's going to be good. And a lot of people say, but the stuff that they wrote was heretical. And I'm like, no, not really, because when I'm reading it, they go to a good length to say that there's things that happen in real life, and then thousands of years later, when Dune takes place, they've mythologized these things that's happened. I mean, they took the story like these were real people, and some stuff worked out, some stuff didn't, right? But thousands of years later, the people in the Dune books have an incomplete mythological understanding of what happened that far back in time, and mostly because of what happened back then, because there was this whole idea of not embracing technology, so they retarded themselves in certain terms like history and stuff.
It's interesting to me because I found the books that, I didn't read all of them either, okay, but especially Dune, and then I think it was like Dune Messiah, and there's definitely undertones, messianic kind of undertones that are throughout that story. Given what's his name, Paul Atreides is sort of like a savior kind of thing, a prophetically prophesied type savior and things like that. So when I looked at it, I didn't really look at it in this, because you're right. A lot of the people view the books that were written by Frank Herbert's son as sort of being not real or something like that. And the way I looked at that was because Frank Herbert's, the way he wrote it was very messianic, that this is the books of Paul, and that's the books of, whoever, Job, and or the book of blah, blah, blah. I just kind of looked at it as like it was just a different telling of the same stories that revolved around the Savior.
Like the four Gospels.
The four Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, I kind of just, and I go, okay. So,
which themselves were written in different time periods in different places, with different communities with different needs, right? Yeah. So that's why they're different. Just the same as these books, like they were a different time with people who weren't really what you thought they were, and things like that, And not having read the other books, the ones that came first by Frank, I can say, just insofar as other books I've read, comparing these books with them, I've been very entertained. There's been at least 2 or 3 places in each book that I've actually either laughed out loud, chuckled at something, or was anxious or concerned about what was going to happen, like really wanting to know.
Good storytelling.
Good storytelling. Or even felt sad about something that happened, like really felt bad about something happened. So if it's compelled me to have those emotions, it's a win for me. And so I think they're excellent books. I would recommend them to anybody who wants realistic human drama kind of mixed into their Dune universe. And I would say that, obviously, again, I haven't read these other books, but to me it really feels like what's going to happen is as these things transition, you're going to see why by the time you get to Dune, the people in Dune believe or think or
what they do.
Yeah, what they do or whatever's going on. I really believe there's going to be some kind of a bridge to it. And I think maybe what happens is, and I could be wrong, but I think people, especially older people like myself or whatever, who've read these books when they were at college or whatever, school, and they really, really dug them and got into them, and then later on maybe picked up one of the random books without reading them chronologically or without already being exposed to the end of the story, so to speak, and they've read these other books and they just didn't get what was going on. Right. They didn't understand that there's actually a chain of events that led to all of this thing, and unless you actually approach it chronologically and read them page to page, you're going to miss that one scene where this person who is on the jungle planet of Rosso or whatever finds this medicine, and it's called Sappho, and he brings it to this guy and how it gets incorporated. I mean, if nothing else, it's an origin story.
Yeah. I think that what's funny about it is it's like one of those books that sort of it's in that same geek cred category as like the Lord of the Rings trilogies and the C.S. Lewis stuff. But Dune was interesting because, and it sort of got I think a little bit pigeonholed in the sense that, it had a full, the book has like a dictionary in the back of it, and it has to, because, Frank Herbert created this. He didn't create Under Earth or whatever it's called, like Tolkien did. He created like an entire, not just, like universe, galaxies, like completely different thing, and then told this epic story inside that. And you got to be able to go, what the Goom Jabbar, what the hell is this, and be willing to, in the middle of the story, flip to that dictionary to read what this thing is, and then go back and continue the story, right? So there's an accomplishment to pulling off reading that book. And that's what I mean. It's like sort of like a weird geek cred. Like it's because a lot right there, it kind of makes it unapproachable for a lot of people. But what gets lost in that necessity to have that dictionary is how fucking amazing that story really is. It's in there. It's really a good story.
Well, if you read these other books like I am, you won't need the dictionary. You'll know what all that stuff means because they introduce all aspects. Like, it's not just like Sappho. Like, I was witness, so to speak, to the first time the voice was ever employed. I was witness to the creation of the first Bene Gesserit, or whatever they're called.
Sounded good to me. Yeah.
And just I'm trying to think of all the other things they've been that they like the first navigator that was created, Norma Simva. And how that happened. Like, she was originally a dwarf and was like really good at math, and she ended up being the first navigator. How Joseph Vanport created other navigators and the forming of the Guild of Navigators, and why that happened. How Holtzman shields were created, who created them, and how it happened, and why. And
well, that's the rub, man. That's the reason why all of these people that find his son's work to be heretical is because what's happened is they've built up the story themselves in their own minds, and the only person that they would accept
is Frank.
That's not the case is Frank.
Yeah.
So anybody else that tells this story has to be wrong because that's their guy.
It almost makes it a religion if he's dead.
That's exactly what it makes it if he's dead. Because when he's alive, it's just a cult.
Yeah.
Right. So now it's a religion. So
that's hard to change.
So unless, you can't even be the guy's son and have had conversations with him and have all of his source notes and everything and then go on.
And they had interviews too I've been doing this through audiobooks, right? So I'm listening to things. And I'm also finding out with the audiobooks how things are pronounced, like the Bene Gesserits and stuff. And it's Harkonnen. It's not Harkonnen. Like
we talked about that.
Yeah. So like they're not just having his notes and stuff, but they've got him like reading sections on tape and stuff. I mean, they've got all the information they need, and they're telling a compelling story. What's wrong?
Yeah.
Why is everybody so
bent about it? Yeah.
Yeah, but I think I think that it's altruistic, though. I think that they want me to have the same experience that they had. Frank Herbert affected a lot of people with his story, and it affected them very deeply, and they want me to take that same journey, and they're very concerned that if I don't go through the same process, that I'm not going to get the same end result.
It's not pure.
But their intentions are pure. It's not just people really being disgruntled or anything. It's that they're concerned that I'm going to miss something doing it this way. But, as with so many things, I found my own path, and I'm very happy with it so far. So.
Well, that just counts as every one of them have had the chance to have their own experience with reading the work, and now you're just doing the same thing. But because you're not starting with Frank Herbert's first book,
it seems a bit apocryphal.
Somehow you're doing it wrong. Well, no, because those books didn't exist when they started their reading the journey, whatever you want to call it, down through reading these books. Those other works didn't exist. So there's no way your experience is going to be their experience. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It'd be like having Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then 40 years later it's not quite that long, right? But decades later we end up with The Hobbit. And it's written by J.R.R. Tolkien's son, who's saying, my dad was doing this and da-da-da-da.
Christopher Tolkien did write some books.
So people but that's not the way that happened, but it could have.
Yeah.
And it would be the same thing. It'd be the same thing with that. But we just accept that because Tolkien wrote it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tolkien. What's the right way to say that?
I don't know. I say Tolkien.
You're the educated one. That's not the reaction I expected. You're the educated one. Nah.
Yeah. You get what you pay for.
What are you gonna do?
My opinion's worth every cent you paid for him.
So, dude, we're coming up on 2 hours. I think that's a pretty good podcast. What do you think?
For our 50th one, we better get 5 more minutes, 4 more minutes in.
6 more minutes in. 4 more minutes in now.
I know, right? So, have you guys ever heard this tongue twister? A skunk sat on the stump, and the stump thought the skunk stunk, and the skunk thought the stump stunk?
That's a good place to
stop.
Yeah, I think we'll end right there.
It's not quite the purloinage orange thing, but
Oh my God. I got messages asking me, how impaired were you guys, on that bus? We weren't impaired. We were just goofing around.
Yep.
You should hear the shit we don't record.
Educatedly impaired.
Holy crap. So I just updated the list of places that the podcast is on now.
Oh, I've seen that, yeah.
Yeah, man, we're like all over the place with the show, and I'm waiting to hear back, but we're about to get on iHeartRadio too.
Oh, that's cool.
I think. I mean, you have to submit like an application with them, and it's a big pain in the ass and all this, but I don't see any reason why we wouldn't, be put on there, because we've been put every place else. But so that's getting ready to happen. I think that'll be pretty cool. But other than that, man, show's growing like gangbusters. The downloads and everything grows every week, and things have just been cranking. So
the sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit. So thanks for listening out there, everybody. Make sure you check us out at noshitcast.com. Again, those links are on the right side of the page, I guess bottom of the page if you're looking on an iDevice. It's not on the right side. It's all the way down at the bottom. But there's links down there at the bottom where you can go, and if you have a preferred method for which, other than iTunes and things like that you want to consume your podcast media, it's there. We're also on YouTube, the No Shitcast channel on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all those places. But again, all those links are on noshitcast.com. So go check us out. And thanks for all the likes and shares. We really appreciate it. And the feedback and the comments have been great. So keep those coming, and make sure you keep sending me shit that you think we might enjoy talking about on here. A big shout out and thanks to Sherfu. I just got, while we were recording today, I got 4 more text messages from him. with people that he's making introductions with. He introduced me to Neil Thompson, and we just had some great shows because of him. Him, too, coming on and talking about his white papers and things like that. So thanks again, Surefu, for everything you do for the show. We really appreciate it. And I guess on that, we'll catch you all next time. Bye.